hello. Welcome to another episode of By Any Means.
By any means.
Hey, we getting there. Listen, I don't know why I do this. Side note, I think I got it from like my uncle or something because every time I say the opening, I always repeat myself like two or three times. My uncle does the exact same thing. I don't know why I do that. Anyways, listen, I'm excited about the show today, guys. Look, we've spoken to you about several different things. This is kind of like our Black owned business series, right? We talk to you about the need to have our own. We spoke to you about how to get yourself psyched up for starting a business. We spoke about how to legally prepare yourself for owning a business. Now we want to talk to you about staying in business, and we have a very, very, very special guest with us today. If you haven't seen, it's the beautiful Miss Rachel. How are you, Rachel?
I'm great. How you doing?
Awesome. And do us a favor, please, if you can introduce yourself to our audience. They're dying to know who you are.
Sure, for sure. So, Rachel Angel, Dr. Rachel Angel, however you want to, refer to me as. I am the founder and CEO of a tech company called Puro. And what we do is we create career pathway management systems. In short, we allow young adults to schedule interviews and then we guide them to livable wage opportunities. Employers and counties use our system to train and develop young people, and then also create data, forecasting data for workforce, for both the in-house internally for employers and for the counties. And for employers actually use this for internal and external recruitment and external and internal training as well. So
That's
hopefully
amazing.
that's cool. Thank you.
That's amazing. That's pretty cool. So, before we really get into the thick of it, how did you come up with the concept? Because I think it's pretty innovative. And as a former serial applier of jobbers, when I was looking at your product and what the process kind of looked like, I thought it was pretty innovative. I thought it was important and unlike anything that I've personally dealt with. So how did you come up with the idea?
I think that, any entrepreneur needs to start with a problem. I think some of the mistakes that we make in Black communities is that we don't start with a problem. Like we say like, hey, I like fish and peanut butter, so I'm gonna go make a restaurant because I like fish and peanut butter. Everybody else gonna like it too. And then we don't really identify necessarily a problem all the time. And so first, identifying that there's an issue that needs to be solved and there's a demand for it is probably the best approach to business. And so I had a passion for young people and a passion for having impact and how do we efficiently and effectively engage, deal with the workforce issues. 22% of young adults are not in education, employment, or training. And so if we have this big, large issue to solve, how do we do that efficiently and effectively and cost effectively? And so that's how I started leveraging technology to do so.
That's amazing. Yeah. Derek, one more question before you chime in, because I see you got something on the tip of your tongue. First of all, I have to apologize to you because I didn't see. This is why I let people introduce themselves. You are definitely a doctor. You are Dr. Rachel Angel. So I want to make sure that I give you that respect because it's not easy, right?
It's not easy. I mean, I don't necessarily express the doctor thing to boast or doesn't make me feel better or anything like that. But I do think to some extent it's important for our community, even when we kind of flash like our nice clothes and our nice jewelry. And we've been able to develop that from a place of legitimacy. I think that we need to and we have to because it's those young adults, those young people that are attracted to it. And if they're attracted to it, they can begin to listen to you. And so long story short, if you want to use the DR, I think it is important, not necessarily for my ego, but for the validation for young adults. And feel free to floss as much as you want to, because I think it has positive impacts.
100%. As a father of two daughters, I agree wholeheartedly. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, no, I want to touch back on kind of the niche market that you drill down to in terms of focusing on the youth,
Mm,
youth employment. I think that's major. And in Rachel, we go back some years now. So we've had several conversations over the years about that. And I want to touch on that. But before that, it's funny that we talk about the DR, as you say, or the doctorate or the doctor status, because literally today I saw on social media I think one of our fellow alums from Hampton. She's a teacher, and she literally posted saying, "Hey, please stop telling young kids when they express that they have an interest in becoming a doctor or a lawyer or something like that that takes extra time for schooling, right?
mm,
More education, so a longer period. Don't tell them, oh yeah, that's going to take forever. Stop discouraging by
yeah.
in different ways these youth from having different dreams. Like
Mm,
oftentimes we talk about on this show, by any means. Please, all the viewers out there, please go check us out on YouTube and also at www.bandpodlive.com. But we talk about economic empowerment. I got my smooth operator voice on right now. I need to change that.
mm,
It's been a long week and it's only Tuesday. But no, we talk about economic empowerment and many other things and factors that go into that. And we've also talked about how we misprioritize ourselves in this society where we focus mainly on or highly on sports, which the Lakers game is on, but sports and entertainment. And
mm,
we don't say anything, even though there's like a 0.01% chance that somebody's gonna go pro
mm,
in terms of entertainment and also sports, that we
mm,
hear more. We don't say any deterrence in that sense, most cases. But oftentimes when kids strive for different, more attainable dreams, we kind of discourage them. And I think we need to get away from that. I don't know, Kelvin and Rachel, do we want to talk on that before I dive back into the?
I mean, it's definitely, I mean, especially if we're talking about the Black community. I mean, all this stuff comes full circle. And really, it all comes down to the psychology and the trauma that every Black person has been through. And so I think that one, we project, we have an expectation of negative things because we've experienced so much trauma, so much negative. And so, for example, you ever been in a relationship with somebody and your mom was like, or they're, the girl you was with, their mom talking about, yeah, watch out, he gonna do this or he's gonna do that. And it's there's this expectation because we dealt with so much trauma. We've been disenfranchised. We don't have the same morals that we would have had passed down from generation to generation if all these different strategies hadn't been implemented to disconnect us. And so when you even start to hear the conversation, you hear things like, like one thing I hate, when people ask me, are you mixed, or like, oh, you can't be fully Black, and I hate that. And the reason why is because what you're really saying to me is that, Black is not good enough. So then when somebody also projects onto me and says, my grandmother used to do this all to me, and I love my grandmother, but she always said, when I was in pharmacy school, you got to finish, as if the expectation was that I would not be able to. And so I think that we as Black people have to really step back and understand the psychology and the influences that are around us. And the best thing that we can do as Black people is develop a filter and be able to see and hear and filter it out, because we are presented with so many things that are intended to position us in a less place than our counterpart. We do have to be careful, and people mean well. They just are unaware of what is going on in society and how they've been influenced. So we all got to create an awareness, because that translates into a number of things, not just how we communicate to our youth and the confidence that we embed in them.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Listen, I get the same. Look, I'm a very ambitious person, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Derek and I are working on something extremely important to not only our culture but to American culture, if I'm being frank, and the world for that matter. And sometimes when I tell people what we are going to do, what we're trying to do, we get that same reaction that a kid would get once they tell somebody their dreams, a grown up their dreams. You know what I mean? It's one of those, you're trying to do what? you know, like we're extremely passionate about economic equality. And when I say, listen, we're about to start a bank, I get that same reaction, even
Yeah.
to this, even to
Yeah.
this day. And it's something that I've become more cognizant of because, like I said, I do have two young daughters, and they often express, well, at least the 4-year-old often express different things that she doesn't know what she wants to do with the rest of her life. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, she might see something on television or on YouTube or in one of the books and say, I want to do this when I grow up. Right. So I'm trying to myself be cognizant of how I speak and making sure that I'm speaking life and empowering her and giving her statements of affirmation,
Yeah.
so that she can grow up thinking she can do anything she can put her mind to because she really can.
Yeah.
And it's the same goes for any kid that's out there. I agree with you, Derek. You can't, and sometimes it's unconscious sometimes, right? Just because you wouldn't do it doesn't mean that
Mm,
they
mm,
would. If that was a young white kid, would you be saying, "Oh no, that's too young. That's too many years of school for to get your doctorate," right? If I were a 36-year-old white man trying to start a bank, would you be looking at me saying, "Oh, you trying to do what?" Or would you be like, "Oh, okay, so obviously you got bread, or people that got bread." You
yeah.
see what I mean? Like,
Man, that capital ingestion, man. Injection.
It's funny though. On the contrary, is when you're in a room full of black boys and every one of them wants to be a basketball player. You tell them they can't do it, and the reality is they can, but it's unlikely. And the reason why it's unlikely is because you likely don't even have the work ethic to be the
Mm,
0 1. And so even when somebody comes and says they want to start a business and they want me to have a conversation with them, talk about what to do next or what to do next in the technology, I'll say, all right, bring me back a pro forma. And if you can't bring me back a pro forma, that lets me know that you're not serious about business in the way that I'm serious about it. And even if you don't know what that is, go look it up because you
mm,
right.
run a successful, I'm sure you can to an extent. Some people have, but for the most part, you can't truly run a successful business until you really understand the ins and outs and the financials of it all. And that's something I also, think from a black community, all these things, these intricate details about what really makes a successful business, we're not taught. And I would say even some of the period of time of me trying to build a business, it was learning all these things that I had never been taught before. I had never even been exposed to. And so when we are not successful in something, it's not because it's not always about the world. It's really sometimes about the information and the knowledge and the access to info that we haven't been granted.
yes.
Absolutely. Listen, here's the question though, right? Because and you're kind of getting into it already. So, just the way I literally said to somebody this morning on LinkedIn, they were having trouble finding a job. They got all these certifications in the world, right? Trying to become a cloud certified, whatever, right? And they got all of these certifications and they're having trouble finding a job and they can't understand why. Um, so I can't go in to tell you why, but what I can do is say, become a magnet. Figure out how to use the knowledge to
Mhm.
start your own. No matter how, start with the problem, like you alluded to, Rachel.
Mhm.
Start with the problem, solve that problem with the knowledge that you do know, and then when you run into something that you don't know, look it up, learn something new, demonstrate your ability to take on something, learn something, something new, figure out a problem, and move forward. Keep going, right? And eventually, either one of the people that you've been reaching out to will reach out to you with an opportunity, or you'll stumble upon an MVP, a minimally viable product, right?
Mhm.
And you'll be able to sell to somebody.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, you've got to be able to have that initiative, that drive, to start, to not wait for an opportunity but to go and seek it and find it and create that opportunity for yourself. That's what a lot of us are missing. You've got to be willing to work hard for it. So, what I kind of want to get into now is where, we talked about this before, but on a previous episode, but, I'd like the people to know kind of what your story is in terms of how you went from being working as a pharmacist, right,
Hmm. Yeah.
to owning your own tech. Like, I think that's an amazing story that the people would love to hear.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I actually don't share this often, but we've raised about $1.3 million in
Say it
investment.
one more time.
We've raised about $1.3 million in investment dollars. And so one of the big goals for me was to be able to get over $1 million in investment. And um, the reason for that was mainly because there hadn't been a lot of African American founders that were able to do that. I mean, it was really like almost like this insignificant number, less than like 0.5% or 0.05%. And so I really wanted to push to do that. So that was one of my goals. And I think that, to kind of try to generalize what the true journey was and kind of what are the things that I learned and had to develop to even get to this point. There's a lot to navigate. There are some things socially that you have no control of. There are some things that exist in your matriculation as a young person and the things that you've been taught and what you've been taught to do that kind of make you underdeveloped sometimes when you're going into this entrepreneurial space. And so I would say when I first started this mainly on a kind of like this philanthropic side. Like I just want to help young people, and here it was. And so then I kind of and I was still doing pharmacy part time at some point. And so then I kind of got moved into the technology world more so because I was trying to solve a problem, not because I just had aspirations to be a technologist. And so one of the things like I'm a big advocate for is not necessary. People always say follow your passion, follow your passion. I think you need to follow your passion, but you also need to follow what is actually going to be lucrative because you can find a way to use your skills in a positive way, but use it in a way that's actually going to be lucrative because we can't always go through life trying to find whatever is going to make us comfortable. That's not how you're going to get ahead. So I moved into this technology space because I was passionate, but I wanted to solve this issue. Now I was faced with now becoming an entrepreneur and everything that came with becoming an entrepreneur. And that's a painful development. There was a certain amount of investment dollars that I had to put in up front on my own. Even though, I had to be making six figures, I was living like I was only making $10,000 a year. I'm watching my friends, buy houses,
That's a
so things.
lesson in and of itself. That's a lesson
Yeah,
in and of itself.
it's a lot. And then as a black person, you deal with all the negative talk. Why you could be making X amount of dollars? Why are you not doing that? You could be, and it's because life is not with created with the intentions of you just going through the motions and doing what's easy and doing what everybody thinks that you're supposed to do. You've got to be comfortable and you've got to be on your dying bed saying that, hey, I did something that I feel was worth it. And so for me, it's all about doing things that were worth it. And so, kind of fast forward, there was this long period of time of really just trying to figure it out, trying to figure out how to be an entrepreneur. I remember reading this book, and then the first like page of the book, the guy talks about how he's a very successful investor and entrepreneur. He talks about how his dad was a Harvard graduate, and he would read the paper to him every day. I don't think people realize the impact that that has on a person or a young person, what it teaches them, and how much knowledge you're going to get from just
Oh, yeah.
having a father that was an investor. So we miss all that. So when I read this book, I'm like, I can't even relate. And so those are the things that we miss. So there's this whole period of time because whether we know it a lot or know it or not, 9 times out of 10, we're behind the curve on the knowledge required to identify good problems and solve good problems. And so that's a big issue. And so pushing myself through that, making sure that our system had a great business case, even though we had this philanthropic side. And then, went from investor to investor, kind of sharpening my skills and eventually was able to land my first investor, land my second, and then land, the biggest investor that we have today. So here we are.
Awesome. And just out of curiosity, and I'm gonna toss it to you next, Derek. Sorry, that way. Yeah. Um, how many? Because a lot of people get discouraged by getting a few no's from investors. How long did it take you once you started pitching to find an investor, and then how did you kind of see?
Oof. It took about 2 years before I even got my first investor.
You said 2 years.
Yeah.
Wow. No, notice, look, listen. It takes time sometimes. You gotta sharpen yourself. Don't just take a few no's and give up, right? Like just keep going. Figure out different ways, keep thinking, keep rethinking, keep making your business plan better, right? Just keep
That's
going.
that's great advice, Kelvin. The big thing is what you highlighted is that you're not where you're supposed to be because you don't have the skill or the knowledge yet. You will be there if you had the skill and the knowledge. If you had it right, you would be there. And so when you're not there, you've got to constantly be trying to figure out what can I do better or what can I do differently to actually get me to the next level. I don't care if you're a rapper. If somebody tell you you suck, don't be like, oh, you just a hater. No, go back and figure out why everybody telling you you suck, and get better. It's not that you can't do it. It's that you can't do it if you're unwilling to sharpen the iron.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, you just spoke to something, and to me, through my private and public career within the public sector or federal environment, feedback hasn't been important, and you both had just hit that nail on the head because, one, Kelvin, we talked about this in earlier episodes. Break through the barriers, break through the fear, and that kind of speaks to what you were just speaking to again, Angel, too, because it is something that doesn't resonate or something that we don't align with to understand. I mean, although Kelvin and I are parents, so I'm pretty sure Kelvin's doing the same thing that I'm doing. Like, I'll give you an example. Maybe about 2 years ago when I started taking my son to the grocery store, and I kind of tied everything. Is funny because it ties back to something that we learned in school or just for life. So I've been working with him on understanding how to read what this product's price point is and understand discounts and what that really means. Is that, saying that it's free because it's BOGO, buy one, get one free? No. Now we're doing math, fractions. So I'm tying those things together to not just talk about financial literacy, but then tie that back to school and education. Because I know oftentimes we've talked about education too, and how, maybe there's some gaps in time in terms of what public schooling gives. Why can't we have programs for, financial literacy and stuff like that? But what are you doing at home? That's funny too, because now we're at this not only work from home, but this educate from home world, right? Due to the pandemic and the climate today. So recently, Kelvin knows this, I made a little business transaction and let's just say I had a little bit of money. And so I don't remember a time where my grandmother, who I call my nana, my mom, even my aunt or anybody else or uncles sat me down with some money and said, don't be afraid of money. Because I think that's part of our community issues too, because, you might be somebody on the street making something legal happen or illegal, and yeah, you got some cash, but there's a lot of people that don't understand money, whether that's cash money, whether that's debit cards, whether that's credit. A lot of people are fearful of it because they don't know about it. So I had that conversation with him, just saying, hey, this is cash. This cash will go into an account. I have a debit card that's associated with the account, but that debit card is essentially the same thing as cash, is just in different forms. So just the fact that I'm able to have those type of early conversations, and we go on to different things. I mean, he hears Bridget, the other host, she oftentimes talks about how, her son listens to, whether consciously or subconsciously, the meetings that she's having at home. So he's like, oh, I want to have a staff meeting and stuff like that. But that stuff matters. And it's funny because even though a lot of us may have matriculated through schools like Hampton University, we still didn't have certain head starts that many other people had. So when people talk about SATs and these standardized tests, yeah, it is biased because unfortunately, a lot of people aren't ahead of the game. We didn't have silver spoons in our mouths. We didn't have parents that knew everything, so they weren't able to share everything. But no, it's a blessing to be in that position now, and I just look forward to further creating that legacy. And hopefully that legacy, no, not hopefully, that legacy will include generational wealth to pass down as well.
Well, yeah, and that's awesome. And then just kind of a couple of things that you were talking about. Um, as far as like people and kind of being behind or being ahead, every parent, when you have a child, the first thing that you try to do is you try to give your child the leg up. So everybody in this world that has a child, they're always going to do whatever they can if within their power to push their child ahead of the next one, whether we kind of communicate that or not. But when you get dropped off that one womb, your parents have already put you against that 1-year-old. So it's you guys are always kind of pushing that. But one of the things that I think, especially for the Black community, like for example, Derek, you got Nike back there. Like, if I had children, if my kid asked me to buy them a Disney movie, I'm going to make them equally buy the same amount of stock that they asked me for to buy from Disney or from Lego or from Nike. And so that they start to understand the value of the dollar that they're asking me for, and then looking at their account and saying, do I really want to buy these Nikes or do I want to actually buy Nike stock? And so that's one of the things that I think that if we could really get our young people in the habit of doing investing, because there's cats out here is in high school, and that's what they got. They had the ticker in their room, and they're being taught how to do that.
Yeah.
And we take over that. So yeah, I think that we do have to build generational wealth. I'm a little bit hesitant to push that too much because what I think we have in America is generational greed, and we need to try to find balance. Because it's kind of like, I don't imagine the majority of us will die with $1 in our accounts. And so, it's kind of like when you even look at like these billionaires, to me, it's like having a house stacked full of food that you could never eat. And every day you get more food to stack it up to the top that you can never eat. And outside there are individuals with their ribs showing. And you're like, okay, well, let me just go back to eating. And visually, that sounds horrible, but in reality, this is what we're doing every day, and it's not okay. And then we can't justify it because we could say, oh, we're smarter than that person. No, we're not. We were given more opportunity, we're given more exposure. Somewhere down the line, they went left and they went right, and we can't always attest that to just being innately better. It's not always the case.
Absolutely, man. I say all the time.
Yep.
All the time. Opportunity should not be I say all the time, opportunity should not be like a privilege. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be a birthright. Like everybody should have the opportunity to figure out how to create a life for themselves that's like fulfilling to them, right? Whatever your definition of success is, you should have the opportunity to build that. But unfortunately, in America, we don't have that. That's not what exists right now. Like you can't, Derek, I think you talked about earlier, for a lot of Black people, well, it might have been you, Rachel, but all we have when we're aspiring as young children is to be like sports or rappers or something like that. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, we have to have exposure to different things, and we have to have the opportunity to actually go out and pursue those things. But if we never know that they exist, then we're already a step behind, like 10 steps behind at the end of the day. And I also just posted on Facebook, by the way, separate subject, but the wealth gap in America, right? Rachel, everything that you spoke of just spoke to my soul right now because I just posted about the wealth gap in America and how between like May March 18th and May 19th, Jeff Bezos made like an extra $34 billion. Like his net worth went up $34 billion at a time where 30 to 40 million Americans lost their jobs, like literally without a job. No coincidence. There's a big stimulus package on the 13th that comes out. On April 13th that came out. And, do you think he really cares about the $38 billion that he lost last year in a divorce? No, he made that back already. Like he's worth all you know what I mean? Than he was a year ago. But the thing is, I don't even know if it's his fault. It's not necessarily his fault. My point was to point out that, America, the feds, they're not it's not really working for us. Like all the monetary policy and all of those things, the stimulus packages, they know you're not going to keep that money in your pocket. They know you're not going to save it. They know you're not going to invest in the stock market. You're going to go to Amazon.com and order some stuff. You're going to go to Walmart and order some stuff because you need it. Why? Because the economy is messed up. So are they really helping you out, or are they, widening the wealth gap in America? Like it's crazy, and feeding the bubble that is the stock market right now, in my opinion. It proves the bubble.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I think it's interesting how America defines growth. Growth is measured by a number of different things that don't necessarily mean that it's distributed among Americans. And so I think that is the interesting thing. And then it is also interesting that we do distribute a stimulus to get people to spend money so that we can now see numbers grow within businesses. And that's a big conversation, because what we've done, and we did this to justify slavery, and human beings do this to justify things that we know are not right, or we know that are not wrong, or we know are wrong. And we keep kind of create this air of self-righteousness, oh, well, I worked really hard, I sacrificed to build a business, and, I'm making all this money because I was able to do this. Well, what you are really good at something. You become really good at something, and because we're not on the barter system anymore, where I could trade bananas and tomatoes, somebody's told me what this is valued at, not necessarily valued at, and so we created a system to devalue things that might be more valuable than it is. Because if every farmer in the world or in America decided they weren't going to farm anymore, it'd be pretty valuable. So until you raise those rates, if every worker in America or in the world decided they weren't going to work anymore, until you raise your rates, then there's value. But as long as we allow people to decide value, we'll continue to have people that can take advantage of the system, that figure out mazes really well, take advantage of the system, and then justify that and control people. You're able to control people by convincing them that there is a certain level of righteousness within their ability to do that. And so, yeah, it's a complex thing, and it's the same thing with slavery. People convince other people by one means or another that this is okay because, oh, they're not this or they're not that, and it's the same thing in society now. If you can label something, if you can create laws around something to validate its correctness, then you'll feel like it's correct, then even if it's not.
Kelvin,
Good.
thanks for bringing this up, because it's important. Well, actually, Rachel, thank you. But Kelvin, thanks for tying that back. Things that we talk. Thank you. The things that you talk about quite often, and that we talk about often, because I got a story to tell. You got Biggie on your shirt. I got a story to tell about sharing what you posted on Facebook. Every comment doesn't deserve a response. So I left that one hanging in the air, because I get it, but it boils down to what you're talking about, Rachel, that self-righteousness, like that, the audacity of someone to think, not my hometown peer, right? But that's another story about the psychology here. But like a billionaire, the audacity to maintain your billionaire status. That Kelvin and I have talked about that. That's mind-boggling to me, because what type of person do you have to be, or what experiences have you had to kind of alter your being to the point that you harbor and keep that much money for investment purposes? I get it. We want to make money, and we want our money to make money. I get it. What are you doing with that money? You know, I get philanthropy and all that, but what are you doing? And that goes back to the Black elite. That goes back to elites in this country. That goes back to the church and the Black church. I saw some on that today too. I mean, what are you doing for others? We are on this earth as relational creatures, relational beings. So to me, it's just mind-boggling to achieve that status and maintain that status while the only giving back that you really do financially is for tax purposes. And you already have beaten the loopholes, especially with, I can't go into that, but this now in these times that tax laws have changed, and tax laws often change. You give away money because it benefits you from a taxable income perspective, as opposed to, somebody said this, billionaires, you have all this money in America, just America alone, the billionaires in America. How much money would it cost to fix infrastructure? You know, roadways, railways, build light rail systems, stuff like that in America, fix bridges. So that's infrastructure. Education. How much money would it take to even the playing field across the board from an education standpoint, as far as resources and buildings, structures? How much money would it take to end American domestic poverty and housing issues, you know, homelessness and starvation? I'm sorry, I might be using the wrong word. I can't think right now, but you know, we have it. The money is out there.
I think, well, couple thoughts, right? Number one, I feel like, it's true, right? Because I've said that before. I feel like Jeff Bezos, maybe if it might take what 2-3% of his net worth to fix like infrastructure in America, right? But in saying that, I realized that a lot of people may not know the difference between net worth and how much cash you got on hand. It's two different things, right? So, you know, one of the things that I'm trying to be cognizant of, and which is the reason why I didn't necessarily blame him for his net worth increasing during that 2-month period that I spoke about. But, you know, I feel like, you know, people have to understand the difference between net worth and how much cash he actually has, when they're determining how much people are giving back. And I don't know that answer. So that's why I'm never really critical in terms of how much money they're spending. It's more so for me about information sharing. Because, you know, at the end of the day, they're already set, they're made. If they can share information about, you know, that will help another person kind of get themselves out of a sticky situation, that would be where that's kind of my thing with people who have a lot of money, billionaires. But the second thought is your friend and him commenting on your status, saying, well, what's wrong with Jeff Bezos, you know, increasing his net worth or earning money? Yeah, that's exactly what I said in the post. I'm not blaming him for it. You know, so it's like it was about the Fed and who they're actually working for, who this economy is working for. You know what I mean? It wasn't an indictment on Jeff Bezos. You know what I mean? So that's number two. The second thought is people have to be more cognizant of the context of the conversation. Don't just take the first thing you see and read in, you know, on its own. You got to read the entire statement in context and then respond intelligently. It's the same thing as like listening to respond as opposed to listening to truly understand, right? So you got to read the whole thing. That's my second thought. But, you know, I had another question for you, you know, Angel. I'm torn. I don't know whether to call you Rachel or Angel or Dr. Angel or but no. Um, so here's a question, right? You know,
Mhm.
I want to go back to you mentioning cash. People not knowing what to do with, or I guess Derek might have mentioned what not to do with cash. But one of the things that I feel like people have to understand when they're trying to go into business for themselves is understanding the importance of cash flow, and not doing too much too soon, right? So you've been in business, well, for at least 4 years, right? But 2 years on your application, correct?
Correct.
Puro.
Right.
Puro. Puro or Puro?
Right. Puro.
Puro. Yeah. So at least 2 years on Puro, you raised $1.3 million. Congratulations on that. That is truly a feat. And you deserve major kudos for that. You are in a league, you know, with very few. So congratulations on that. But you know, how do you manage that cash? How do you manage what kind of considerations do you um, do you take when you're managing your cash flow and how you're monetizing your business and you know just kind of keeping things into perspective?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, it goes back to being able to create documents, pro formas, and forecast these things because so many of us do not. For when we start a business, we do not sit down and say, "All right, how much revenue do we want to make?" We don't say, "Oh, well, how much is it?" So we start and say, "Hey, we want to make $1 million this year." Well, what is it going to take for us to make that $1 million? How much product do I have to push? How do I get my product out? And all these different questions that if you produce those types of documents, you are forced to answer. You can't go without answering those questions. I almost think it's way more important than a business plan. If you sit down and really look at your numbers and your financials, you're forced to answer those questions. The other thing is like something that Derek touched on is that African Americans, because we come from humble beginnings, we don't go into a room. I need $5 million. You know, somebody asked me today how much you got. We got a raise in 12 months. I said $3 million. And it's not even a lot. It's not a lot of money. And you have to get comfortable with saying this is what it is required for a business to be successful. If $250,000 is $500,000 to open up a McDonald's, then that's what it is. And you figure out how you acquire enough cash to be operational, and or you figure out how to organically grow. But you would know that if you create a path or a plan or a forecast and how you grow year after year. So that's so important for individuals to learn how to do, because if you try to go in front of an institutional investor and you can't communicate the numbers, it's over. You're not gonna get any investment, not in a real setting that's really talking about high growth or we're talking, 5 years, 10 to $20 million worth of revenue. That's not going down. And so just really learning and understanding your numbers is so 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 important, and then getting comfortable with money, getting comfortable with saying like, "Hey, I can get $5 million. I can get $2 million." You have to get comfortable.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
can't be afraid of money for sure.
yeah, no, that was a big thing, because like even when I used to ask like young kids what they want to do with their life, and I start off with how much money they want to make, and they say something like 25K a year. I'm like, that's not how much you want to make, and because you don't even, but not understanding what does it really cost for you to have Gucci sneakers on every month, a
Mhm.
different, not understanding what it costs to drive an Audi every month, because you don't know what that budget really looks like. You're gonna start at 23K and realize, oh, I can't afford none of this stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You know what I love about what you're saying is so many people focus on the customer facing side of the business, right?
Mhm.
They don't put enough thought into the operations. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? They don't put enough thought into, you know, all the behind the scenes, all the, like you said, financial forecasting about, you know, strategically planning to reach a goal. and doing all the dirty, grimy, dingy work that isn't flashy, but
Mhm.
everybody wants to have that brand that's out in front of the customer doing this and doing that. You definitely have a customer facing brand that's extremely important. However, for you, the most important aspects of your business and being able to stay in business and operate is making sure that you have your finances in order, right? That's
Mhm.
not flashy. It's not cute. It's not sexy.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that about you because I think, a lot of people, like you said, they go into business wanting to be the next Gucci or Fendi or Prada or, Coca Cola or, Dell or
Humble,
HP.
yeah, humble
They don't know
yourself.
what they have to do to get there.
Some of the wealthiest people. I have a mentor that's a billionaire, and this dude, every time I see him, he got the same shirt on, the same shirt. And I'm not necessarily saying that if you garnish wealth that you shouldn't buy you a Bentley or, you know, but there is a certain level of humility that comes with success, and so I think that if you can approach it in a patient way and try to do things right and try to be humble, you likely will be successful. Because trying to rush to show everybody how great you are, I think that's a mistake. That's probably a mistake that I've made as well. So be patient.
That's another thing, right? Mistakes are bound to happen, but it
Yeah.
ain't about the mistake. It's about how you respond to it, right?
Absolutely.
So, learn your lessons, take your lumps, and keep it moving. But yeah, I mean that's just my opinion. But speaking, I love the fact that the back end, the planning, the strategy, the infrastructure is extremely important to you. What preparations or what do you find is important to you in terms of that customer facing side, right? Because it's definitely very important.
Mhm.
Um, some would argue it's not as important as the infrastructure, but at the end of
Uh,
the day, it's still very important.
well, one thing that I found is that that's a tough question. The reason why it's tough is because not every situation is the same and not every business is the same. For example, if someone wanted to start selling some type of retail item via Instagram, the way that things work now, you don't even have to have the item. You could literally pre-sell this item
Right.
on Instagram without having any infrastructure in place. And all you may do is dump money into marketing and get a bunch of pre-sale items. And then once you got enough, then you actually deliver it. And maybe even communicate to the customer, hey, you can order this, it's not in stock, but we'll get it to you in 8 weeks.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's what you can definitely be online. So it's really difficult to make statements about where you should be targeting your business. What you should be targeting your efforts on is understanding that business so you know what the best approach is. And I think anybody selling retail items, I don't see the point of even buying it or making it until you got X amount of a certain level of orders. It doesn't, why even you don't have to even invest $1. I got a friend that started a company, did not invest not $1, and they started making like $20,000 a month just on the strength of getting orders and then seeing if it worked first, and then here they are. So it depends on the business. It's just a really difficult thing to make a general statement about.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. You think about people. I look at social media influencers, right? That's the beauty of the internet. I mean, social media influencers, they'll have for some strange reason, everybody's drawn to them, right?
Yeah.
No. I'm not not like that. Not like that. I'm just saying each individual has something about them that is, very, very attractive, apparently, or people are drawn to it, so they get a bunch of followers. I think about people. I don't want to give free advertising to people, but I admire stories like B Simone, right?
Mhm.
Because you know what does she know about fashion and lipstick and whatnot? You know what I'm saying? And lip gloss and t-shirts. But all of a sudden she's making like $1 million, right? But she's also a case study because when you don't do your research and you put too much faith in people and you don't know what you're really getting yourself into, you wind up getting caught in a situation like she was caught in, creating this book and being accused of plagiarism, which it clearly was, apparently, right? Allegedly. Um, and really could wind up owing a whole lot of money. So, I agree. It depends on it depends on the type of business you are, but still, there should be no substitute for you doing that dingy, grindy, dirty work on the back end because you could wind up getting yourself in a whole lot of financial trouble by not just kind of, I mean, by
Kind of
just
on
not.
your research. And there are some people that never did it and they just, was able to go into something and get lucky or whatever the case may be
Yeah,
happens. But
yeah,
my recommendation based on what I know, and to increase the odds that you'll be successful, you should have an awareness of all those things. But yeah, I do think it's really hard to try to compartmentalize businesses, because
definitely,
we can't. They all have a character of their own. Yeah.
for sure. Wait,
So, I look back at the title, "How to Stay in Business." We've already had a wonderful conversation that spanned more than speaking to just how to stay in business, um, in terms of business and life. But something just hit me, and it just I'm going to present an analogy too. We're relational. In my public sector service, we oftentimes have mottos or taglines like mission first, people always, or people first, mission always. Sometimes it varies depending on, what department you're in or whatnot within the
Mhm.
government. But in terms of business, Kelvin, we heard this, and I want to get back to value too, because you mentioned that, Rachel, and that's funny because, you know, as much as we do our market research from a business aspect and we try to ascertain or understand and project what our value is going to be or what our MSRP is when we talk about black business and black consumers before as well, you know, quite frankly, when we talk about the economy and currency, I mean, currency is man-made, like, and then the value is also man-made. So that's really funny, and I'm glad you spoke to that, Rachel, in terms of, you know, not necessarily Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but I have to, I've been having this conversation a little too often for my liking with my kids because they've been like, well, I want this, I want that. And I always talk to them about this stuff. It's not always about what you want. And you got to understand that there's a cost to be the boss. So like
Right.
these things cost money. So I talk about the money that they have, cash on hand or the accounts that they have, and
Mhm.
being able to afford that, and like you alluded to as well. Hey, can I afford this now, or is it worth you know losing cash to purchase this item versus maybe investing somehow, whether
Mhm.
saving or investment options. But yeah, and it's funny because my daughter is the one that really kind of does that the most. She's like, I want this, I want that. Yeah, okay, well, we got to talk about this a little bit more. But in terms of not necessarily Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but just basic needs, you hit on food, agriculture. I
Mhm.
mean, look at the value there versus like whether sports and entertainment or big business. And yes, there's big pharma, but value is, forgive me for not using the best word or terminology, but it's made up. And
Mhm.
quite frankly, when it comes to the economic side of it with supply and demand, hey, a lot of these businesses are setting their value. They're assuming or creating their supply, and they're creating through their branding, through their business, the demand. And some of them are sustaining that. And meanwhile, we the people, have the power. like you alluded to, Rachel. Like we literally could. I'm not going to label it such as a boycott, but we determine what the demand is, which can dictate the fluctuation of price or value. But we don't do that oftentimes. And but going back to how to stay in business, what this is what resonates with me in terms of relationship to business. And that can be friends relationship, professional relationship, eros, love, romantic relationship, what have you. If you have a business, why did you start your business? What sparked your interest? What was that problem set that you mentioned, Angel? I mean, why, Kelvin? See, Rachel, when you mentioned the problem, right? What problem are you solving? So, and oftentimes I don't label it as problem, but I talk about a need. So, what was your initial need in terms of the business?
Yeah,
Why?
I mean, so I mean, what STEM for me was helping young adults, right? But what we don't realize is that human beings are all interconnected. We actually need each other. Wealthy
Yes,
people
yes.
need people to spend money. Um,
Ooh.
Private institutions need young people to be capable of working in any type of business or any type of organization. And so at the point that we start to see slowing of capable young people or a disconnection or disinterest and being a part of society and functionally a part of society, that then starts to turn into a business case. And then that there's value in a solution that helps make sure that pipelines, make sure that people are more qualified and developed to go into these employment opportunities. And so there's an invested interest in employers and counties and nonprofits to make sure that these young people are developing themselves and developing an awareness and an interest to be functional in society. So that's when you're talking about value and problem, they actually are almost in the business world. Um,
One and the same.
yeah, they kind of affect one another because if there's a
Mhm.
problem, solutions become valuable depending on how much of a need do we need that. And then you hit on another thing of the creation of value. Facebook was a created value. We didn't know we needed it. We probably walked around and said, "Dang, I wonder what that person in high school was doing." But we didn't necessarily think it was a problem. And so this resolution that was created. Um, Came about. And then again, you might create a brand of clothing. I'm gonna throw this on a number of celebrities. Now I got value, and I'm gonna make it super
Yeah.
expensive. You're absolutely right in the ability of people, businesses to create value. I'm not interested in those kind of businesses because it's too difficult to break into those saturated markets. You are welcome to break into a saturated market. But too often, I think Black people, we want to go do something that we're familiar with, and I urge Black people to, in every bone of my body, to get out and get exposed, because what you'll start to trigger yourself to identify things that could really use your help outside of maybe creating a clothing line or
Right.
selling something that may be just more so familiar to the value of the people that are around you instead of the whole scope of you know Americans as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Kelvin.
No, I was just going to say real quick that for me, value is like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, if I see something, like, I'm willing to pay for things that certain people aren't. Like Derek and I were on a text message with our other partner for our other business interests, and I mentioned to them that the headshots that I took for them look better than the headshot that I paid somebody $350 for. You know, it's like, man, if I had known I had this skill set, I'd have done it myself. But no, at that time, I thought I was going to be the next Forrest Whitaker or Sam Jackson. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was willing to pay that $350 for a photo. You know what I'm saying? So, value is like beauty, man. It's in the eye of the beholder. It all depends on what's valuable to you at that point in time in your life, and you'll be willing to pay for it.
One other thing, and I know that we're probably like getting closer to the time, but one thing that I also want to talk about is unit. unit economics. And this is something that we often don't understand enough as African Americans, is that you can go and make something. You know, we want to go and make maybe some jewelry or some kind of clothes, and so we may spend an hour and a half making this one article of clothing or this one piece of jewelry, and then we're so proud of what we made, we'll go sell it for $15, right? So every time I sell this piece of jewelry, I sell it for $15. We made absolutely no money off of that, because if you don't understand your unit economics, you just spent an hour. One, you bought the materials. Let's say the materials cost you $1. Now you $14. Let's say labor took you an hour to make that. And so now I don't know how much your time is worth, but mine is worth as an entrepreneur more than $14 an hour. And
Absolutely.
so then the time it took to sell it. So you really, if it took you more than 2 hours to make and sell that product, you basically made $7.50 an hour, if that, maybe $6 an hour. So if you don't know your unit economics, what you end up doing is doing things because you want to say you have ownership. Don't just have ownership, have a business. And
Right.
that's my biggest advice.
100%. Yeah, man. Because you don't understand. You don't know how many times I've had people say to me, "Oh, well, that's all you had to do. I could have done that myself." Well, listen, you could have, but my time is worth $200 an hour. I'm sorry. So I get it, but you know, want me to teach you, I'll teach you for $200 an hour. You know what I'm saying? Like it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can't make something and if I'm making something, it's got to be worth $100 to $200. If I got to spend
Yeah,
an hour, just
right.
just the reality of it.
So before we wrap it up, Derek, is there something you wanted to add? I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, that value piece is important. That's we Calvin value has come up in multiple episodes of ours, and value is really important in terms of the value that you set yourself at, what you're worth, but then also your product. And that's whether or not we're talking about when we had an episode about turning your passion to paycheck. So still being on a 9 to 5 job, somebody's payroll, right? But also kind of filtering over into creating your own business. And that value set is really important. And Rachel, to use some of your words from earlier, we're behind the curve in that too. And it's psychological as well, because a lot of times from where we come from, uh, humble beginnings or what have you, we don't understand money and we don't understand value and a time value management, right? So, we may be, I alluded to this earlier, we may be fearful about money, but then we're fearful about whether it's going to an interview and saying, hey, this is the amount of money I need, for a job, or even we're fearful of setting our value or price point where it really should be because of various reasons. And I think it does tie back to psychology in a sense. And I really hope that we can delve into that a little bit deeper at some point to kind of break those curses and break those chains too, because we are valuable. And our services, our products, our minds, our intellectual capital or human capital, it is value, and we need to get beyond that. But what I will, Kelvin, what I will do is briefly kind of tie back the relationship and business as well. So what I was trying to allude to is the fact that, hey, if you're in a business and you've made it to a milestone of 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, which everybody doesn't make, how do you sustain yourself? Business sustainability. How do you stay in business? And think about when you lose that flame, right? And go back to that beginning. Yes, we need to evolve and grow, but also go back to why you're doing it. What's the root cause? What's the problem set, right? And what are those solutions that you develop to solve that problem, and how you continuously evolve that? I think just understanding your problem your initial problem, your continued problems, monitoring that throughout can help you to understand what was that root, kind of rekindle your flame back to that business to help you keep motivated and directed at solving the solution and kind of sustaining that. And that's from a business aspect. But in a relationship, it's the same thing in a sense. Not always, not all relationships with businesses are alike. There's no absolutes, right? But sometimes you got to step back, step back a little bit. What's that dance I got? I don't know, but you got to take a step back sometimes because you know what brought you here? Why are you here? What's the problem? Root cause analysis. I do that from an assurance management standpoint. Like, what's the root cause? And if there's a root cause and you've assessed what that is, let's move forward with developing feasible, plausible solutions to move forward. And there's assigning the value to that. So I think that's important to think, sometimes, hey, if you lose interest or if you aren't hitting that value. And then it's also resources. Understand that, Rachel, you brought this up. It's not just about doing things on our own. It's the resources around us as well. So people are important, and sometimes you got to bring in the right person, the right mind, diversity of thought to help you to solve that problem or further solve it, and improve that. So there are a lot of things to think about in terms of, hey, are you still interested? Have you lost the interest? Hey, have you lost sight of what that initial need and problem was? And hey, as you've evolved over time and changed, what are your projections? What's your thought leadership? What's your future thought? Like, where's your direction going? How can you problem solve for that? What are the goals and future goals that you have for yourself to keep you going?
And just a quick response to what you're saying. I want to be very clear. Every Black person, every human being has the capacity to grasp and internalize different concepts and be very good at those concepts and be able to execute and implement those concepts. What Black people deal with is not a lack of ability or ableness to be successful or to be able to implement these concepts. What they lack is generational knowledge and generational information. And so we know that there's always this extra push, one, to create an awareness and a consciousness that we don't have that access. And more than likely, we were not introduced to it. So once you create that awareness and once you put your ego aside and say, you know what, I might not know this, then it is your responsibility to go out there and pursue that information. So somebody might hear me right now say that. And I can tell you right now, I am in the same boat with you every day. I'm up under CEOs and presidents of multi-million dollar, multi-billion dollar companies that know way more than I do. And then I have to step back, subdue my ego, and come to the table with an understanding that there is things that I don't know, and it is my responsibility to receive and find that out. And so don't be so arrogant that you think you know enough to go and start a business. Get the information as much as you can. And sometimes just starting will teach you. So I'm not saying don't start, don't delay the start, but we all have the capacity. And when we talk about Black issues, it is not to be negative about what we don't have or to feel bad about what we don't have. We have the capacity. I'll leave it at that.
Absolutely. Look, I agree. It's like, I always say you have to. Well, I have this saying, you, I'm very religious, so God gave me peace if I walk with poison parity. Right? I don't care where I am, in what room. I don't care how much money you have, how much knowledge you have, whatever the case. I could be in a room full of rocket scientists. I don't care. At my best, there's nobody better than me. Right? You might know different things than I know, but you're not better than me, right? It's
Right.
that having that confidence, and that comes from understanding like that quadrant of knowledge, right? The things that you know, the things you don't know, the things that you don't know that you know, and then the things that you don't know that you don't know. Everybody has that quadrant of knowledge, every single person. So just because you know more about something than I know about that subject, I know more about this than you know. right? So it's okay to be ignorant. Ignorant is not a bad word. I understand it has a negative connotation, but it's true. Ignorance, the definition of ignorance is just something you don't know. You don't know it, right? And that's okay. Everybody is ignorant about something, right? It's all about understanding that and, feeling confident about the information that you do know and your ability to learn new information, right? And your desire to learn new information. So, um, that's where that saying comes from. It's not about thinking that it's not coming from a place of like arrogance. It's coming from a place of humility, right?
Mhm.
I know that I don't know everything. I know that you know more about something than I do, but I know more about stuff than you do at the
Right.
same time. So you're no better than I am. I just want to get in here, share this information, this knowledge, and keep it pushing, right? So yeah, that's what I mean. That's what all boils down to when you carry that same attitude into all the mistakes that you make, all the successes that you obtain. At the end of the day, treat them the same, learn something from it, and move on, right? Um, and for me, that's how you stay in business. That's how you maintain a relationship, right? Business in business, you're in relations with your customers. In relationships, you're in relationships with your peer um or your significant other. At the end of the day, it's about communication. It's about understanding that nobody's perfect. You might make a mistake, but you need to learn from it and learn quickly. You know what I mean? In business, at the end of the day, for me, and these are just kind of my final thoughts, guys. That's why I'm just kind of rambling for a second, but it's for me, how to stay in business. It's don't be afraid to make a mistake. Don't be afraid to learn from somebody, and admit that you don't know something and learn something new, right? Be in constant pursuit of knowledge, right? Knowledge is infinite. Um, but at the end of the day, just be in relation with your customer and try to make an impact. You think about this guy right here, man. He only spent a little bit of time in the game right before his life was tragically taken away. But when he put out a product, when you heard his name, when you heard his music, you could expect something great. And even though he only spent this much time, relative time in the game, he's still considered one of the goats of hip hop, right? So, make an impact. Be humble, know your stuff, do your research, do all the dirty grindy work, but then make an impact and then, be consistent and honorable with the products that you put out and create value, right? Um, that's kind of my final thoughts on how to stay in business, guys. What are your final thoughts?
Uh, do you want to go there?
Yeah, I can go because, as you're our esteemed guest here, I think it would be lovely to have you, kind of hit with the final points. Obviously, normally I'd say, hey, ladies first, but I think you probably hit it home better than I could. But I think this is another valuable subject. Yes, we have this black owned business, how to stay in business. We really do care about our specific niche or market of, our own community. However, we understand that we are of the at large community. So, in terms of this, we know that a lot of people literally are, contemplating becoming entrepreneurs or owning businesses or in that process in different levels and different phases. And I think it's important for people to understand how to not only start and protect or legally protect your business, but how to stay and maintain your business or sustain it. That being said, I think we've spoken to a lot of keys and gems in terms of how to do that from a sustainability standpoint. Knowing what your problem is, going back to that root, um, being humble, so humility, um, understanding your resources, whether that's yourself, diversity of thought with other people that are on your payroll or not. You can outsource to other people to gain efficiencies and effectiveness as well. Um, understanding your brand, understanding your worth, your value. That's important. Knowing your goals. I mean, you've spoken to performers and stuff like that, Rachel, and I really appreciate that because, it's not just your idea, it's what you can do behind the idea, the due diligence to kind of bring that to life and sustain it as well. And I do think it's important for people to, not just think this is a game like Monopoly, not Monopoly, right? This isn't just a game as in Monopoly. This is something that's real. So take it as such and take it seriously. Um, so yeah, understand yourself, understand your business, understand your resources, and move forward. Yeah, no, I'm taking notes today as well.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on the same thing. Um, Yeah, and so I absolutely think that it is all about one, having a certain level of humility to know that there are things that you may not know and being able to pursue that information. And I think that to stay in business, it is a constant adjustment every day. Nobody knew COVID was coming. And so, how do you adjust? How do you pivot? And then making sure that you understand the process of your business so that you know what levers to pull when you do have to make those adjustments. So I think those are the biggest things when it comes to staying in business. And then always have a plan, for worst case scenarios, because there will be times, and even when you do need to make a pivot, there will be a moment in time where it takes a little bit, maybe a month or two, to make those adjustments, to go left instead of right. And so be prepared. Don't be arrogant. Don't be so arrogant to think that nothing could ever happen. And I think, individuals will do well by doing that.
I think that was amazing, amazing, amazing advice from all three of us. And it's funny because we all touched on kind of different things. So that was kind of dope. And we didn't do that by design. So, listen, thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to, first of all, say thanks again to Rachel, Dr. Rachel Angel. You are wise beyond your years. And I'm so happy for your accomplishments and the successes that you've already had. And I wish you nothing less than the greatest successes for the remainder of your career, as I'm sure you will achieve them because you are a bright, bright diamond amongst rubies out here. So thank you. Listen, all the viewers, do us a favor real quick, Angel. Rachel, if you could let the viewers know where to get your application.
Sure. I mean, it's available desktop, iOS, Android, which Piro. Just go to Piro.com or look up Piro, Peerro. It's kind of the beginning of my IG name. So, yeah, it's pretty easy to find. And I'm pretty easy to find too if you're like look online or something.
Awesome, awesome. And just so you guys know, that is her IG handle right there. RROANGEL. Go follow her, man. And download the application and use it. Listen, thanks, guys. As always, thanks for watching, viewers. We love you. We appreciate you. We are live every Wednesday. We drop a new episode every Monday, and then when technology permits, we drop those, on every other day, right? So just kind of keep an eye out for our stuff. But more importantly, come and join the conversation. Look, we're not just doing this because we want to sit on camera and create a podcast. At the end of the day, our whole goal is to create and encourage courageous conversations where we address real issues, both internal and external to the Black community, right? For the betterment of us as a whole. So we're trying to break the stigma of, just kind of hoarding information and not sharing. We want to provide a platform where you can come and learn some valuable information and, do something good with your life, man. Because at the end of the day, you deserve it. And if we can help you do that, and we're more than willing to do that, right? So thank you guys. We appreciate you for watching. This has been another installment of By Any Means.
By any means.
Until next time. Peace.